Hello everyone, it is Friday, it's still live on Fry, and it is Audrey Button from Safe Harbors of the Finger Lakes. I use the pronoun she, her, hers, and it is Sexual Assault Awareness Month and Child Abuse Prevention Month. So for today, we're going to be discussing victim blaming. I know last week Maggie kind of went over like some myths around sexual violence, which will be a good segue into victim blaming today. And so we'll talk about victim blaming. I know we kind of mentioned it earlier this month too, to kind of go in what that is, why it's important that we don't do it, how we can avoid doing it, and all that good stuff. So, and just a reminder, it's actually almost into April, so make sure you are keeping track of all the stuff that we have going on. Our last Instagram Live for April is next Friday, which is the last Friday of April, and we'll be discussing forensic rape exams, so keep an eye out for that. And then we'll be getting into May, so we'll get the topics ready for May, so keep an eye out for the topics for May as well. So before I start, I always like to give a content warning, as the material I'll be discussing is probably sensitive to some, so please take care of yourself however you need to. And also, before I start, just a quick disclaimer, the views and opinions expressed in this video are not necessarily those of Safe Harbors of the Finger Lakes, but of those in the video. So with that, I really wanted to kind of take a dive into victim blaming, what that looks like. So if you're not familiar with victim blaming, it's just that attitude or belief which suggests that the victim, rather than the perpetrator of the incident, specifically around sexual violence, is at fault. So the victim's at fault rather than the perpetrator for what had happened. So victim blaming occurs when it's assumed that an individual did something to provoke the violence on themselves, by their actions or inactions or words or how they dress, and so forth. So you might see this, why did they walk home alone at night? Why did they drink too much? Why did they dress that way? They're dressed provocatively, or anything that's putting the blame on the victim, as it sounds, victim blaming. So it's focusing on what the victim did or didn't do, rather than what the perpetrator did. This is extremely harmful, not only to victim survivors, because it's also preventing people from coming forward to report, because it's part of the reasons why survivors don't report or tell anyone, because of that, fear and kind of almost normalization of victim blaming in society. It's extremely harmful. A lot of them don't come forward because of this. They don't feel like no one's going to believe them, and just all the backlash they might face from that. So, I also want to emphasize the only person at fault in this situation is the perpetrator. The perpetrator made that decision, took advantage of that person, and the only person at fault is the perpetrator. So, engaging in victim blaming attitudes only reinforces what the perpetrator did. It's letting them know, because, we're not going to put the blame on you, we're not focusing on what you did, that's extremely harmful. It only, basically says it's okay that they did it. There's no blame, there's no punishment, and that's only reinforcing it. And a lot of times people are serial rapists. So many times if they're not told it's, not okay, they're focusing on what the victim did or didn't do rather than what the perpetrator did, then they're saying, okay, society thinks this is okay, I'll keep doing it. So that is extremely, extremely harmful. And that's, the victim has already experienced so much trauma and stress. I'll kind of go into that in just a second here. They're not being held accountable for their actions. So we need to hold perpetrators accountable for their actions and take the blame off the victim, because it is never their fault for, just doing what they were doing, because obviously the perpetrator knew what they were doing. So, people think that people need to blame the victim sometimes to feel safer or better about themselves. Like, oh, well, they left their door unlocked, so that's why they came in and raped them or attacked them. So I know I leave my door locked all the time, so it won't happen to me. And in a way, it kind of makes people feel a little bit better about themselves in hopes that they themselves don't become a victim or survivor. in that way, because, you know, they're focusing on that, what the victim did or didn't do, so they feel like they don't become a victim themselves. And that's extremely harmful, because you're just feeding into that perpetrator so they don't feel like they're in the wrong in any way. So there's that kind of mentality about how not to get sexually assaulted versus not to sexually assault somebody or not rape somebody. It should be focusing on not raping or sexually assaulting people, and not how to avoid getting sexually assaulted or raped, because that's focusing. I know you've seen, like, don't walk alone at night in the dark. You know, make sure you leave your car locked. Don't drink too much. Don't do drugs. Don't dress that way. If you dress conservatively, you'll be okay. It's just focusing on what they should do to avoid it, rather than just telling people not to do it. And that's really harmful. That's feeding into this issue of victim blaming. I mean, I also want to remind, the things that cause rape are rapists. Things that do not cause rape are, you know, drinking, drug use, whether intentionally or unintentionally. So someone might take advantage of them and use a date rape drug. That's clearly also not okay either. Things that also don't cause rape is, you know, what someone was wearing, what makeup they had on, how they look, if they were flirting with you, their sexual history, previous consensual encounters do not mean you can rape them. And how someone dances and walks, anything like that is not okay. You always, 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 always need consent. And if people are under the influence of drugs or alcohol, they cannot consent. Consent is an active thing. People need to be enthusiastic. They should not be pressured. They should not be forced. They should not be threatened. And if you have to, like, pressure them to say yes, then it is not consent. And we've talked about consent before a couple weeks ago, so go back to that. Consent is about communication, and if you think someone's not able to consent, you should probably not do anything. Make sure that they're safe, and so forth. So that does not cause rape. What causes rape is rapists. So I want you all to keep that in mind. So what to do to avoid victim blaming? Make sure that survivor is safe and comfortable. Just say, you know, if they share with you that they are a victim or survivor of sexual assault or rape, you know, just make sure they're okay. It's just about being empathetic. And I know I've talked about empathy before. Set aside whatever thoughts or beliefs you have and just say, you know, hey, are you okay? How can I help you? You just want me here to listen. Just be supportive, because you have no idea what it's like to go through that. It's extremely traumatic, and trauma is extremely complicated too. You know, remembering that sharing their story is the most difficult thing a survivor could do, especially with that victim blaming idea in society. That fear of how someone might respond is extremely terrifying. So imagine trying to get the courage to share your story and then, you know, just worrying about how people will respond. Inform them of their options and resources, or get them connected to someone who can. You know, do you want support? I don't know how to support you, but I know this great resource in the community, like Safe Harbors, that could help you. And getting them connected to the right people that can help them, that is extremely helpful. You know, understand trauma and how it impacts the brain. Trauma literally restructures the brain in so many different ways. It also impacts memory, so it can lead to memory loss. So remembering that survivors and victims can't remember things as well, especially after a traumatic event. So keeping in mind how trauma works and how it impacts the brain. Trauma is different for everybody. It's a very individualized thing. So it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing either. So keeping that in mind. So just, you know, believe survivors. Just believe them, you know, because that's extremely empowering for them. It makes them, you know, more confident, especially if they share that story that's extremely vulnerable and hard for them to do. And just what not to do. Do not ask what they were wearing, what they were doing. Maybe don't ask what they, you know, if they drank too much or if they were doing drugs or anything along those lines. Don't assume a victim will act in a way you think they should act. You know, don't make an assumption about, how they should have acted or what they should have done or what they shouldn't have done. Trauma, like I said, impacts us all differently. There's no perfect victim and there's no perfect way to respond to trauma. So keeping that in mind, just be an empathetic person, and just, especially just remember, it is really difficult to share that, especially with this victim blaming attitude so prevalent in our society. Just be supportive, just listen, and just see what they need. That's the biggest thing. So thank you all so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. So if you need any support or information or resources or anything like that, want to find out more about victim blaming, safe harbors, or anything like that, you can always give us a call at our 24-hour hotline, which is 800-247-7273. You can always go to our website, which is www.shflny.org. As always, you can always comment or direct message us on social media. Big news, we're on TikTok now. So if you want to check us out on TikTok, we're kind of exploring that world now. So make sure you definitely reach out to us if you need anything. I hope you'll have a great weekend. Remember, tune in next Friday for our last Friday of April. Thank you all so much.